Well, good morning, all. Never in a million years would the people who heard the message of Jeremiah knew exactly what he was referring to. Never in a million years, the people in the Old Testament, the people 600 years before Christ, have known what Jeremiah was referring to. And this is called a prophecy. And Jesus fulfilled hundreds of prophecies. The prophecy from Jeremiah, again, 600 years before Christ, the prophecy was this. I myself, God says through Jeremiah the prophet, I myself will gather the remnant of my flock from all the lands. Never in a million years would people have referred to or understood that God meant he would become incarnate. That was the big question in the Old Testament. Well, how is God going to fulfill this prophecy? I myself. This is the greatest, one of the greatest elements of the Christian Catholic faith is the power of the incarnation. That God, out of great love and mercy for us, descended and took on our human flesh in the womb of Mary to say, I myself, God himself, will shepherd his people. Now, what kind of shepherd do we have? And this is what I want to spend just a moment or two on. I'd say one of the greatest elements, if you remember nothing of Jesus, could I be so bold to say this? If you remember nothing about Jesus except one line, you would understand Christ. What kind of shepherd, what kind of God willingly comes down incarnate? This is the context from the gospel today. And it happens not only today, this happens multiple times and places in the gospels. This one line, this truth about what kind of shepherd, what kind of God is it that comes down to his people. This is the line. When Jesus disembarked, he got out of the boat and saw the vast crowd. This is the line. His heart was moved with pity for them. If you remembered nothing else about who is Jesus, who is the kind of God who willingly comes down, almost humiliating himself to take on our human flesh. If you remember nothing else about the person of Jesus, God is the one who, when he sees us, his heart, he has a heart after all, is moved with pity. Now I want you to experience this with the power of your memory. I want you to think about right now a memory in your life. Yesterday, 20 years ago, can you remember a time when another human being looked on you with great mercy, with compassion? Don't look at me. Look in your experience. Can you remember an event? Can you grab hold of something? And I wonder if you can see their face. What did that look like? What was the context? A couple things just to jog your memory while you're thinking of this. I've kind of been thinking about that question this week. And immediately, a few memories came to mind. The first one that actually came to my mind was when I was like 11 years old. My family, my mom, dad, there's 10 kids in our family. Once in a while, we were kind of a poor family. We would go on these big family vacations. My dad grew up in Colorado Springs, and so we would go down to Colorado like every other year, basically. And so my father rented a 15-passenger big white van, and we drove down there from, Twin Cities area down to Colorado. Well, we were going through Nebraska. We had passed through Omaha a long time ago. We were in that long, deserty section between Omaha and Denver. And I remember the van. My dad stopped talking, which is like, oh no. He's like, I think the van is overheating. Sure enough, the van overheated, all of us, and it was like one of those 90-degree days in July. And we pulled off into this very desert-like part of Nebraska. And my dad's like, okay, we got to be safe. All the kids pile out. So my mom was coming out. All of us kids were just sitting there by the side of the road. My dad opened up the trunk or opened up the hood of the car. Was like, this is not good. And you could see the steam coming up. And all these cars were just passing us. Just passing us. And one car stopped, and it was this truck. And I remember when I was like 11 years old, the face of this man who got out, and he saw us in the ditch. And I remember him seeing us. And then he came over and was kind of talking with my dad, looking at it, looking at the vehicle, kind of were twisting some things around. Eventually, he got a tow truck, moved our truck over to his own house, put us up into a hotel that was still a long way away, and then the whole next day, he worked on this van with my dad, and he got it fixed. And sure enough, we went down to Denver, Colorado, and beyond, happily ever after. But that was the first memory I thought of when, like, what's my experience with someone looking with mercy? I remember seeing his face. He saw all of us in the ditch. It was like, I'm going to help them. Second memory that popped up for me, of just like, what is your experience with mercy or compassion? I remember when I was a kid, I always had trouble with my eyes growing up. I don't know why, but it seemed like I was like a magnet for things floating around in the air, dandruff, bugs that would always end up in my eyes. And so when I was like a little kid, I remember like repeatedly going up to my dad or my mom, but especially my dad, and I kind of cover my hand over my eye with a little piece of like whatever in there. I'm like, Dad, my eye is broken. My eye is broken. And my dad would get down on his knee and say, and I remember his face. I remember he would get down on his knee and like kind of open my eye a little bit, kind of spit on his fingers a little bit, take that little piece of whatever out of my eye. I remember how he looked at me. When you think about the person of Jesus, one of the greatest truths, if you remember nothing else, who is Jesus? He is the one that when he sees you, good times and in bad, places of serious sin or places of great grace, young or old, he looks on you, his heart is moved with pity and compassion. I'd say if all of you who are here, you are in some way here because you take Christ seriously and you are seeking him, exactly how the crowds did. When they saw that he had gotten in this boat and he was going across the lake, they saw that and they're like, we need the Lord, and they ran all the way around the lake. And if you're here this morning, you are seeking Christ. And so when Christ especially sees those that are seeking him, all the more so when he sees that each of us individually, his heart and his face is moved with pity and compassion. I'd say one of the greatest challenges in actually taking Christ seriously, I see this in my own life, I wonder if you might as well, is discouragement. You're trying to take Christ seriously, you're trying to follow the commandments, you're trying to order your life to be more and more a disciple, seeking to become a saint in some way, shape, or form, but then very quickly, you just like fall flat on your face all the time, if we're being honest, if I'm being honest. And it's a great enemy to begin giving into the spirit of great discouragement. We get very crusty, and that gives way oftentimes to an erroneous image of God. And we start in our suffering and our discouragement, we get crusty, and we start giving way to a lie about who is God. And we think, he doesn't care about me anymore. How could he ever love me now? I can't even get my act together. He's disappointed in me. God is angry at me. God had turned his face away from me. Those are lies. It's not true. When Jesus disembarked and he saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them. I wonder if we started to internalize that truth into various parts of our life this week. Sometimes, when I'm hearing confessions, we hear a lot of confessions here, and there's a long line of people on that back wall. I go to confession pretty regularly, and sometimes when you're in the line for the confession, people, we all have sins, of course, kind of by definition, but sometimes you just feel like you're in a bad place. Sitting in that wall, waiting for the mercy of Jesus, sometimes there's this little mind process for many people that says, God doesn't love me now because I'm in sin, but once I get out of that box, then he'll love me. Jesus Christ, when he sees people waiting in line in serious sin, his heart is moved with pity for them. Jesus, when he sees people leaving the sacrament of mercy, his heart is still moved with pity for them. St. Ignatius of Loyola always exhorted his disciples when speaking about the life of prayer, particularly the examine. When you go to examine your heart and your life and how you are living in God, he always exhorted his disciples back in the 1600s. He'd say, the first step when you go to prayer to examine, first, in the span of about an hour, Father, first consider God looking upon you with great love and mercy. Because when you start to consider that first, you have hope to continue going forward. And many people, even in prayer, I've witnessed this myself, when we when we go into prayer, we just see our weaknesses, our inadequacies, and we kind of almost do like this self-flagellation. And we've almost eclipsed ourselves from God who is mercy. When Jesus disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity. I wonder if we remember nothing else but taking that truth this week into when in times of our prayer, good times or bad, yes, God so loves his people that we were yet dead in sin, but through the precious blood of Jesus, we have been brought near to God. Let's not be afraid to believe in the love that God has for us this week.